Hey there you lot, welcome back to Fat Glenn's Fish. We're on to part 5 of my series on the rebuild of this bloody rack next to me. I've finally got somewhere with it and I've got a bit to show you on the other side. See you soon. So it's Sunday night and I've put in a big day out here. I'm a bit tired and emotional, but it's been a day where I finally got somewhere. The rack is effectively done now. We've got it all assembled, leveled as best I can, and I've cut my holes through the shelves for drainage. I've got my airline system in place, I've got lighting on, and we are painted. So I finally have something to work with. The last little job I'm going to work on now before I go in for the night is, it's a really minimal sort of Mickey Mouse thing, but it's also really important. I'm going to be putting polystyrene in the shelves, which is a shortcut that some people might take, but I think it's a really significant, important step not to take that shortcut on. So why polystyrene is important to the build? It just gives me a little bit of margin for error. If this 1.2 metre shelf that I've put in to put a tank on has a millimetre or so of difference from one end to the other, and you sat a tank straight on that bit of timber, you're going to have a lot of pressure on a tank twisting wise. The polystyrene gives you that ability to absorb that little bit of slope. Like it's hard to squash this stuff, but a tank full of water, which is 250 odd kilos of water, plus the tank, plus the ornaments and such, you know, we've got 300 kilos potentially of tank here pushing on this polystyrene. So and I should have shown you this when I pulled the old shelf out, I had polystyrene that was more compressed on one end of the sheet than other, and that's what saves tanks from splitting. So for the sake of a $8 sheet of polystyrene that I've got from Foamland down here, and this is going to do 2 shelves worth, $4 per tank-ish. It's a great insurance policy, so don't take that shortcut. You know, I've just had so many people tell me about tanks cracking, and you find out that they've literally sat their tank straight on a rack, and it's no wonder that that accidents happen. Now, as I said, I've bought sheets of polystyrene from a franchise down here called Foamland. I don't know whether that exists on the mainland and elsewhere, but down here, that's a thing. You can source polystyrene. This piece here came out of, my wife recently bought a bed which had packaging involved. This has been next to my bed for a few weeks, and of course Elwood, the dog who you've seen in other videos, comes in every morning to visit me, and he's managed to knock this over and walk on it and split it, but that shouldn't be too much of a drama. I'm gonna put this up on our top shelf, and you just need a nice sharp Stanley knife or extendable knife, and we're just going to gradually work our way along the shelf. Gentle sawing motion. If you just drag through it, you're going to get a lot of tearing and those annoying little particles which we don't want. It's just a matter of slow and steady with a good sharp knife and we'll get a nice straight piece of poly that's going to fit our shelf well. The entire top shelf's uninterrupted from one end to the other. There's no legs to deal with. So there's our offcut, which is no use to me. There's our exposed edge that's a little bit daggy because of me intervening, but guess what? We're going to hide that at the back anyway. So now we've got a nice smooth edge along the front of our shelf. I know I've said in other videos that this is a breeding room and you know, aesthetics don't matter too much, but of course they do. Like, I'd love to be out here having a bit more of a positive experience and not thinking, geez, I wish I'd done that a little bit better. The challenging part here is, oh no, it does fit in, there you go. I'm going to drop my 1200 by 450, 1200 by 900 sheet in here, and we're going to rinse and repeat. So that's going to give me a piece for this shelf and the one underneath. So just slow and steady, good sharp knife, but this is a great insurance policy, like for the $3 or $4 worth of polystyrene, or in this case a free bit that came out of packaging. You know, you probably keep that bit that comes with your flat screen TV or your new fridge, because if this tank of fish cracks, how much would you pay to have not gone through that? $3 or $4. I think it's an important step to take. Today is an exciting day. We've finally hit the jackpot with some good sunshine and a little bit of breeze, so I've got my painting done at last. The 4 tanks have come up nicely, and I've got a friend coming in about an hour to help move these into the shed, and I've just suddenly realised that I've still got one little job to do on these, which is some drilling some glass, which is what I'm going to do to allow for airline access. So I'm going to quickly run through that and show you how I do the drilling. I like to drill my airlines through bracing, which the win you get out of that is that if you're opening a sliding lid, which I've still got to complete in these tanks, you're not chopping airlines. I don't have quarter panels cut off bits of glass because fish will invariably find that crack in the glass to jump out, and it also causes a lot of evaporation in the shed. The method I'm going to use today is to use the little diamond hole saw. That's a 6mm bit in the end of my drill there, and we need some water and a drill. It's not desperately desirable or important where I'm going to drill these couple of holes. The format I'm going to go with is a couple of holes in the centre brace, which will allow me to run an egg tumbler and a fry basket, and I'll put a hole in either end, which are going to be my 2 sponge filters. And obviously that's all interchangeable depending on, sometimes you'll have a fish that wants to breed in a corner, so you'll put the filter out of its way. The method is to start with your drill not dead vertical, because you're just going to, it's going to scoot all around. You want to start on one edge, and this that looks really terrible for OH&S. That barrel there is just straight stainless steel, so I tend to grab that between thumb and forefinger just to support, and we're going to gradually get a good little rut going, and that's when we'll stand up straight. And now we're running. The important part of the job here is just to add a little dash of water every so often, which is all about keeping the temperature of the drill down. But it does also wash a bit of that debris out of the way, which just helps clear the hole. And it's just a matter of gentle pressure. Keep it as straight as you can. You can kind of pulse the speed a little bit if you feel that it's stalling out. Now what I'm drilling through here is 8mm glass, I believe, and you can kind of get a feel for how you're tracking. That little diamond bit on the end is about probably 5mm long, and you can kind of feel when that's starting to get below the surface. But we don't want massive downward pressure here, right? We want the weight of the drill to do a lot of the work. And just as I said, just regular irrigation. Now today, what I just said about the painting was right, but the sun's gone behind a cloud. It's probably 10 degrees outside. This glass is still pretty cold. Thanks, Elwood. And I like to change my grip as I'm starting to get through, and I'm using that part of my hand to support the drill, and these thumb and forefinger now to stop me from pounding straight through. Because the last thing I want to do is break through the glass and then be putting downward pressure and smashing the drill bit into my brace, because that'll potentially crack it. I'm guessing we're getting pretty close now. So I've got 4 tanks here. I've got to drill 4 holes in each in an hour. I don't think I'm going to get it done today, unfortunately. So it might be that I get my friend to help lift the tanks out into the shed. I can't do this job with them in situ in the shelf because there's not enough clearance. Taking its sweet time. I don't know how many of these holes I would have drilled over the years. It's been every tank that I run air into is like this. Oh. And it's probably time I bought myself a new drill bit, because this is starting to struggle. All right, so there we go, we're through. I think my little shard of glass came out, but the thing to do, I just have a piece of an old coat hanger here, which after each drill bit, just poke it through your bit to clear that debris out, because if you let them build up, you're going to have trouble on the next one. So that's how we drill our glass with the 6mm air line. There's going to be some work done on some of those old tanks that I'm resurrecting out the front, where I've got to change the diameter of the hole out through the bottom of my tank, because they were plumbed for 20mm pipe, and I'm upscaling to 25mm. So that'll be a similar job with a different drill bit. I'll show you that one in a minute. Here we are with some tanks in our racks at last, and I've slept on this overnight because I was disappointed with how this unfolded yesterday, and I had to have a think about why this came around, the result that we got. And it turns out that it wasn't anything necessarily wrong that I did, but the issue we've got, and it's very prominent with this tank up on the top row here, is the tanks are coming out past the front of the shelf, and I always this comes back to the here we are in 2026 in Australia, when the metric system was abolished back when I was the imperial system was abolished back in the 70s when I was at school, and yet we still do things in feet and inches. And this job's ended up being a collision of those two approaches to measurement not working out the way we needed them to. So down the bottom here we've got 4 tanks in. These are the tanks that have been coming out of these shops, right? So these, we approximate them at being a 4x18 by 18 tank, but these actually measured at 1200 mil by 450 by 450. Now this tank down here is what I would call true 4 by 18 by 18. So that tank's actually about 122 centimetres long, and I think it's 45.5 centimetres by 45.5, and that's what we've got up here with a 3-footer. That's 910 mil long and 45.5 by 45.5. My plan was to have these true 4 foots, true 3 foots up on the top row, because I've got a little bit of extra length to play with here. And down here I made these shelf spaces 121 long by what I thought was 45 wide. And here's where we ran into the third problem. If you remember all the way back in episode 1, when I was sort of buying all my materials, these came from Bunnings. And this melamine sheet here, when you look on the website, and I'll put some B-roll up, here's the product, which claims to be 2400 long by 450 wide by whatever the thickness is. Now, if you may remember, I asked to get a few of these cut in half back in the day, and I remember when I was talking to the bloke at the counter, you know, so that's 1200 by 450, yeah? And so I got some pieces that were 1200, and my plan was just to have a little bit of gap at either end of the shelf. What I found was when I and that kind of worked, in that I had pieces that were 1200, but then when I looked closer at my stack of pieces they'd cut for me, there was two different lengths, and it turned out that one was 1200, and when I looked a bit closer, the other piece was about 122. So it turned out I've got 2 intact sheets of melamine up on top, and they actually measure 2420, so not 2400 but 2420, and they're only 445 wide. So here we are with our problem. Here's one of our 45 centimetre wide tanks hanging out that 5 or so mil, even though it's hard against the back of the shelf. Now, I could roll with this, but this is going to be here for 15 years, and all that can possibly happen here is that I'll come around the corner with my ladder and I'll chip one of these corners or whatever. And obviously, as mentioned, like, the problem's way worse here up top. So what I've decided to do, I'm going to, this is retrievable, and it's probably going to take me an hour and a half to do. I've got to get these tanks all back out, and what's going to have to happen is I'm going to have to undo the screws along the back of my melamine there on all the pieces of melamine, because that's what's joining, what's spacing the front of the rack to the back of the rack. Once all those are unscrewed, I'm going to creep the rack forward 5 mil or whatever, it might even be 10 mil. My measurements are such that I think I can get a 10 mil gap at the back, and then we'll screw them back down. So yes, the melamine will no longer go hard against the back form ply, but that's not a big deal. And the tank will obviously hang, once we get it flush with the front, the tank's going to hang off the back of that melamine a tiny bit, but we've got polystyrene there, so pain in the ass, but not irretrievable. So the rest of my afternoon's going to be getting these tanks out, doing all this work with the screws, and it goes on. So let's see you later for how it looks in the end. So I've lost another half a day. Hello, Henry. But it's been worth it. My my sleep on it policy, I did wake up just too worried about this issue with the tanks not being far enough into the shelf. So we've pulled everything back. We're nice and flush now, all the way from one end to the other. That was a pain in the bum. All the tanks had to come out again, and we sort of stacked them on the end, and did what we could. Hurt my daughter's foot helping me lift one, but this is in a great place now. It's all looking really good, and I'm super happy, and now the fun really should start to kick in. We can do some plumbing, and I've got 2 more tanks outside that are ready to come in as soon as I get a lift from my friend. We kind of didn't get it all done the other day because I was starting to get concerned about the issue that I've discussed. And just to this is the end build. I've taken my bit of form ply off the end here because I've realised that when I plumb this roll, I want to have access here. My plumbing's going to come down the end here, but just to give you an idea of how much that form ply stiffens it up, that's pretty wobbly, isn't it, Henry? So I'll be happy to get that screwed back on as soon as possible, but it's going to make the plumbing job easier. It's been a lot of fun, and someone's been helping me a bit much, so it's kind of slows you down, don't you, Henry? Yeah, you silly boy. Enough cats. Alrighty, we're getting on towards rapid progress. I've got some tanks sitting in my shelf now that basically I could have water in as soon as I get my plumbing done. My tanks throughout the shed are drilled from underneath, and we've got plumbing availability to take water from the tank to the drain. I'm hard plumbed into my drain on the left hand side, and we're going to reproduce that on the right hand side. I'm going to be using all threaded components, and the reason I'm going that way is to avoid waste. This is part of the plumbing that came out of the rack. I did this back in 2010 or 11-ish, whatever it was, 10, 11, 12. And this is all what we call slip fittings. So these are smooth socketed T-pieces and elbows, and basically we're just gluing pipe into those, pushing them together, and away you go. And then we've just got threaded in the end for our rainwater tank outlet to go in top. So you're probably thinking, where's the waste? Now, the waste comes in at this point where we're at, where I've had to take all that pipe out, and now it's time to reinstall. I've had to cut pipe off. Now, I could reuse these. I could buy just straight sockets and plumb again, and away we go. But where I've gone to upgrading to the threaded fittings, why is over the journey I've had several of these tank handles crack. Like, all this stuff gradually gets brittle the longer it's sitting in the shed, and once that handle cracks, yes, you can get a spanner on the centre of it, but effectively it's buggered and you can't replace it without replacing everything. So I wouldn't advocate for the slip fittings again, and that's exactly what we're looking at here. What I'm going for is all new components, and the beauty of that is that if we unscrew all of this from our spine, this is our drain water outlet, right? All that is completely reusable in a new situation. And more importantly, or as importantly, is that if for whatever reason I break that handle again, I can take this out without interrupting the rest of my plumbing system, and I can replace that with a new one and put it all back together without any gluing. So we're going with all threaded in our replumb, and I'm going to spend the next little while out here with a glass of wine and just gradually do my Lego, and I'm preemptively setting up a couple of formats here. One format is rainwater tank outlet, male to female, BSP elbow into our valve, into a BSP nipple. The black stuff is polyethylene, the white stuff is PVC, and then we're screwing into a T-piece which will form the drainage line to our drain. This format works for the tanks where the plumbing is in the corner, so that's over in the corner of your tank, and there's enough room to have that pipe run underneath, and that'll all still fit under and between the timber frame. The other format we're going to build is a mostly the same, like rainwater tank outlet into our valve, but this time we're going another right angle into our T-piece, and this is how we're going to plumb into our tanks where the drainage is in the centre, because you've only got sort of half the tank's width to get your plumbing and all your valving. So that's the couple of standard setups we're going to build here. As it's happened here, my bottom row of tanks are going to take this format where the plumbing is in the centre. The middle row, the plumbing is in the back right corner, so this format, and the top row, the plumbing's in the front corner, so we're going same. So I've got to get together now, and I'll start taping these together and explaining how that all works. Alrighty, we're going to use some thread tape. This is so that we get a nice seal between our brand new threads. And there's a part of the build where it's going to be more important than not. The method I've learned is you want to keep your tape nice and flat to begin with. I hold it with my thumb and wrap it on clockwise. Whoop. And make sure you continue to hold with your thumb, because that's exactly what happens and you end up with loads of tape out and about. We don't want too much tape. Hello, Henry. I'm going to be using both sides of this nipple, so we're going to put both lots of thread tape on to begin with. I'm just going to pick Henry up before he knocks my camera down. Up you go, buddy. There you go. Now, T-piece, screw it in, and the reason I wrapped that tape the way I did is so that when I start screwing this into the thread, I'm smoothing the loose end away, right? I'm not going back against it and bunching it up. So that kind of saves a bit of mucking around. And from our faucet tee, by the way, I should be explaining the names of these fittings. So the faucet tee, it's a slip fitting there and there, so we're gluing pipe into there, but it's a threaded fitting there because we're screwing something into it. This is our PET, polyethylene nipple, when you've got a thread either side, and this is our threaded ball valve, 25mm. And the 25mm, by the way, that refers to the internal diameter of our piping. It's not the external diameter, it's the internal. And we're just going to screw that there. And at this stage, hand tight's actually going to be fine with all this. The next piece I'm going to put a bit of thread tape on is our polyethylene BSP, I don't know what the hell that stands for. This is what we call a male to female threaded elbow. Male being the male part of the thread and the female part of the thread. Now what I've learned over the journey too, when I switched to all this threaded stuff 7 or 8 years ago, and I thought I was clever, I didn't know that you had a male to female. So I was buying just female to female, and I was putting a nipple in both ends, so I was putting an extra part in that I didn't need to. But the good news is that I've bought that now, so it doesn't make any difference. I've still got it. Now this, where I said I just a wrap or two of threaded tape on this side, this one is a bit more important, and I'll explain why in a sec. You want a good thread there. So if you imagine my tank here, we've got, and our tank's full of water, but our drain line is, our tap is off, so we're not going to drain. From that side of the tap to the drain, there's no pressure, right? It's free to just drift down the drain, and so you're not going to get any dripping. Like, I probably could have nearly done that without thread tape, if I'm being honest, but just out of habit I do put a lick of thread tape there. This one, however, when that tank is full, we've got near enough to 50 centimetres of head pressure acting into this drain. So I put a decent bit of thread there, thread tape, and we'll do the same when we screw our rainwater tank outlet, which we can't do till we put this through the tank. We'll put a good lot of thread tape on the bottom of that, so that when we screw that into here, that's resisting that 50 centimetres of head pressure, so that we don't get a drip out of here and there, because once it's in there, it's kind of hard to do much about. So that's the way we'll go. I'll sit out here now and have a sip of Savvy B, and I'll just prepare all my, I guess what you'd call a DIY bulkhead. And on that subject, right, you can buy purpose-built bulkheads from the aquarium shop or from online stores, and it's one of these things where I'll never get sponsorship from any aquarium product industry, because that's a really expensive way to do it. I've got 13 tanks in this rack, so I've got 13 of these to make. I think that the parts I've got here round out to about 20 bucks. I'll get a firm number on that and maybe put it on screen underneath this. But those 5 or 6 parts, as I said, completely reusable in a new build. The only part that you really can't salvage is once you've got pipe glued into your tee, that's kind of a goner. But if you're willing to cut your pipe and just put a new coupling on, it's not irredeemable as well. So I think it's a good way to do it. I get my stuff from Dural Irrigation and have done for years. And back to my Lego and my wine. Got some plumbing done at last. I've just had a lazy kind of week, but have made some progress. In under there is the drainage point plumbed under the slab. So I've got a hole drilled through the top of a 100mm end cap that goes into pipe which runs under the concrete across here to the messy abomination under my sink, and that goes out and through to the main sewer line under our house. I've started the spine, I guess you'd call it, of my drainage for the rack of tanks we've installed. Now, if you look inside, the tanks on the bottom row are drained from the centre point, and that's the plumbing setups that I showed you before. So imagine this in parallel with the tank, and that's based on room, because if I went across the tank, it's not going to fit in there readily in that situation. So our plumbing is in line with this elbow all the way from one end to the other, and we'll run with that. Where it got complicated and why I've taken this form play off is up at the next level, so the middle row, our tanks drain at the back corner, and if you can imagine, this is what we've got plumbed underneath. So this is at right angles to our drain line. So we look under here, our plumbing drain line is towards the front of the tank. So I had to bring that in onto the spine here via this T-piece. And up the top here, it's going to be the reverse. These old tanks drain at the front, so our valve's going to run that way, where we reconnect to our drainage line at the back of the tank. So that was just a little bit complicated to work through, but we've gotten there now. And where I'm at is I've got the first 2 tanks connected on the bottom, and I've just got to get down on my guts now and do some more gluing. And these 2 are just plumbing sort of to nowhere, so they're ready to join on to the subsequent tanks, and that will all terminate at the right hand end. So all my drainage water will feed from right to left in this shelf and down to the drainage point underneath the bottom left here. Rightio folks, I'm on the back end of getting these tanks in. Something that I hadn't got to yet is to bore out some drainage holes in these old tanks that were in the shed, that were plumbed for 20mm, and we're going to make that a larger hole for 25mm drilling. Now, you might remember earlier in the video we drilled some air holes in top of the tank with the little hole saw. today I'm going to be drilling I think that's about a 32 mil drill, and what you'll notice, this is more like a hole saw you would use with timber, right? We've got a drill in the centre, which is what would pilot the hole and stop this from skating around. Remember the other day I started on the angle to get one edge biting into the glass, and then we were able to tip over. This is a different scenario, but the tank we're going to drill here, the hole is in the front corner, and obviously the pilot of the hole is drill is nowhere to locate. So what we're going to do is I'm going to use a couple of blocks of timber to form myself a little corner to push against, because this will skate around a bit. And now that we're at this point, it's just a similar deal. We're going to get our drill site pretty wet with some water, and this is probably going to be super loud, so apologies. And I'm just going to gently push into that corner. And as you can see, it's a bit of a wild ride to get it started. Chuck's slipping a bit because I'm sort of pushing hard against the timber and there's quite a bit of friction, but once we get started we'll be able to move the timber out of the way. Rightio, I think I'm safe to move my timber blocks. And one last splash of water. One last splash of water again. I thought I was going to get through in that one. And yowza, so looks like that's been successful. And just by the way, these hole saws, you can buy a set of these on eBay. This probably came from Alibaba or whatever, somewhere Chinese, but they work really well, so I'm able to do any of the plumbing I need to do for my tanks between the combination of the small hole and the large hole, and with reasonable success. So give it a go if you feel up for it. I've just realised as we get towards the end of this video that I haven't actually shown you the plumbing. I think we did a couple of bits of footage of me screwing fixtures together. So this is one of our assemblies that I've made, whereby the drainage line is going to run at a right angle to the valve, and that's how we're going to get access to the corner of our tank. I've got my rainwater tank outlet already through the tank. There's no thread tape yet, but that'll become apparent why. Cutting pipe, I'd recommend buying yourself a pipe cutter tool at your plumbing outlet, or Bunnings in this case. You open it that way to get it fully extended, and it's got a ratchet style action. But see, when you just start squeezing in one direction, it does kind of flatten the pipe a little bit. So to get it started, just give it a little twist, and that allows it to, you're not trying to cut, straight through one big piece all in one go. You're kind of cutting in on the edge. So that's cutting your pipe, giving you a nice square edge. good purchase to have in your kit bag. I've got this part basically ready to plumb, so I've done the bottom 2 rows. My drainage water is going to go down that way, where all the water is draining from right to left in my shelf. So that's all hard plumbed to this point, and I've got my drainage line here ready, and I've got the next bit of PVC to go down to the next tank, and we've got my little assembly here which we're going to screw loosely onto this rainwater tank outlet for gluing. The process is to get all your surfaces primed and ready. When you buy your PVC, it comes with a very shiny finish on the inside, and that's not what we want for gluing and getting long lasting results. The primer that I'm going to use here is basically a chemical which just chews into that plastic a little bit, and the method is just to get into the various nooks and crannies. Good to do this in a ventilated area because it does come with a bit of a punch, and obviously I want to do the outside of the pipes that are going in. The inside doesn't matter because we're not gluing there. And prime our areas, so that's priming done. And you can buy this is a clear colourless primer. You can buy pigmented ones like reds, and red typically so that it becomes visually apparent where you have primed. Obviously I'm looking at this plumbing under here when I'm working in tanks, and it gets a bit ugly, right, if you've got all that colour acting, so I don't roll with the pigmented primer. And the last thing I'll talk about here is, if you look inside that T-piece, you'll see there's a ridge. And now we've talked about, this is what we call the slip part of the fitting, where we're going to jam that pipe in, and the idea is it doesn't go past that little collar or ridge, and the same on the other side. What I'm going to do is, I think I'll go on to the rainwater first. So that's just on, you know, a few turns onto my thread. And when you get ready to glue, you want to be on the clock here, because this stuff does go off pretty quickly. So I'm going to put glue into both sides of my T-piece. This is a job that is messy the way I do it. That stuff will dissolve your polystyrene too, which is not a great outcome. And what we're going to do here is pushing hard from the right. In an ideal world, you would sort of twist these pipes into each other to get the best smear, and that's what I'll be doing with this other piece, because that's not going anywhere at the moment, and that'll form our next joint. So that's a good solid joint, and the reason I've screwed that on there is just purely for placement, right? So that's in the centre of our drainage hole, and I've jammed those joints together. So that's a good solid joint as far as I'm concerned. And so look, I think that's probably where I'm going to leave off on this video. There was a lot to cover. I've still got some jobs left to do. You can see on the bottom 2 rows are tanks in, water in, and no filtration as yet. I'm still doing some bits and pieces with sort of putting a few pieces of glass in, which will involve, some of it's just gravity. This piece has just got to be literally glued on, will sit there, so I'll get that done tonight. Some of the other jobs I've got to complete are these last little pieces of glass which I have to glue up underneath. They're all cut and smoothed on edges, so that's just work, and I need my clamps for that, so I should be able to do 2 tanks tonight, the other 2 tomorrow. 3 more tanks now that we've drilled that other hole to go up here, and that's it. 3 more tanks up here, plumbing to complete, round that out. So we're really getting there. Finally, it's been a hell of a lot of work, and hope this video hasn't been too long for you. Next video will be me restocking this wall with filtration and with fish. So finally a bit of colour and motion to go with. So hope you're still getting something out of it, and I'll leave off here. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.